Well, welcome to Groovecast, Neal Wilkinson. Thank you for taking the time to speak to us.
Oh, you're welcome. A great name, Groovecast.
I think that's
Awesome.
Charlie's brainchild.
Yeah, yeah. Better than Chops Cast or yeah. Groovecast is
Yeah.
that's a great title. Yeah.
Yeah, so for those who aren't aware of Neal, he's been around the industry for a long while, worked with a lot of different people from, bands, artists, Van Morrison, Mike and the Mechanics, James Morrison, many others. Done a couple of shows, many sessions, films, the complete package, you might say.
Yeah.
But let's sort of take it back and just dive into how you got started, Neal. Where you sort of got into the business, got started with lessons.
I don't know if it's probably not too dissimilar to a lot of people's stories, really, but it was fairly simple. My uncle, my mum's brother, was he was really great. I mean, I thought he was great when I was a kid, but even when I think back when I used to watch him play when I was in my 20s, he was really great. He had a bit of a kind of Ronnie Verrill, what's the word? Kind of a authority about him, and he played traditional grip with one finger over a bit like the only person I've seen do that is James Gadson.
Yeah.
So my early pictures of me at the kit, I'm playing like that, But then he would switch all the time to playing match grip this way, like Ronnie Verrill. If you watch any footage of Ronnie, he's generally playing match grip. So I saw him play when I think I was about 7, and then my dad bought me a little kit, and I had lessons with my uncle for a year or two, and then I was lucky enough I was playing in I don't know why I did it, but a little junior talent competition. I was so shy when I was a kid. I don't know why I did it, but I ended up on stage at this junior talent competition in Margate. Side holiday kind of thing with mum and dad. And there was a junior anyway, I won some thing, but there was a guy there called Chris Hayes from the Melody Maker, which at the time was the premier music magazine or newspaper. And it was the place to go read articles about new albums, new bands forming, anything about the music industry. And at the back, there was a section like wanted ads, musicians wanted, all that kind of thing. It was a great paper. And Chris Hayes was one of the journalists, and he happened to be in the room when I was playing. And I think I was 7, and he came over to my mum and dad and said I should have lessons. It's a long story, but cut to the chase. My dad phoned him, and he prepaid Max Abrams for 6 lessons to see if I was worth teaching, So, of course, Max, having been paid for 6 lessons, probably thought, yeah, he's good for 6 lessons. Anyway, so that was definitely a whatever those kind of events, whatever you want to call those events, but it was certainly a very good chance meeting. Which led me to study with Max until I was 16. So I had eight years studying with Max Abrams, which was fantastic. It couldn't have been any better. He taught people like Simon Phillips and let's see who else. A lot of people like Mike Smith, who's an amazing studio drummer around London. Stuart Copeland went to him a little bit. Lots of people. He was a really great teacher. Jack Parnell, the great drummer, arranger, impresario, whatever. Amazing. So, and also one of the big ones that nobody knows about is Jim Marshall of Marshall Amplifiers. And at Max's funeral, when I went to the funeral, Jim Marshall was there and gave a speech and said, without Max Abrams, there'd be no Marshall amplification. He said, because Max was responsible for me being involved in the music business at all. So yeah, Max Abrams is a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, still a
legend,
and
then from there, you know, that so they were my early years, and I was working in the Charlie. I'm sure you know this, the fabled working men's social clubs in and around the Midlands and the North. You know, which I've got to say was great because it was just me and a keyboard player, a girl called Anne, who was great, and she was really old. She was about 17, you know, and I was 11. And I was doing 2-3 nights a week. We were doing 2-3 nights a week at these different clubs, you know, and all sorts of people would show up, comedians, kind of juggling acts, singers, whatever, and throw this music at us, and we just play it, you know. So it was great. Yeah, it was really good.
It's about the best start you can get as a working player, you know.
Exactly. And you can imagine these. You can imagine these people showing up like a singer or whatever, saying, "Okay, where's the drummer?" You know, and I turn up in my shorts and I'm about 3 foot tall. You know, but I could read okay. You know, having done 3 or 4 years with Max, I was fairly up on being able to read a simple chart. You know, so yeah, it was all good.
If you couldn't read before doing a gig like that, doing the working men's clubs, you could after. Yeah. You know, and you learn how to work with the act and with the, as we call them, the turns.
Yeah, that's right. And some of my favourite moments actually were in those years, because sometimes if there was a band, and I still can't really explain this, but sometimes if there was a band on the bill, they would set up on stage. So we would have to move off the stage, down at the front, and face back at the stage. And I don't know why. I loved that. There was something nice about. I guess it was almost like I felt like I was in a studio or something. You know, I wasn't on stage performing. I was huddled down off the stage, music. You know, and I was kind of in my own world. And it was a nice. I sort of. I don't know. I used to pretend I was like Ronnie Tutt with Elvis or somebody like that, or some. Yeah, you know. It was very cool. Yeah. And I had all my, you know, my 6, 8, 10, 12, 13, all my massive toms, and the kit looked great. I was like, oh, yeah, well, check that out.
The whole Hal Blaine going on.
Yeah. Hal Blaine, Ronnie Tutt.
Karen Carpenter.
Actually, yeah, the main guy. No, but not many people know about this guy, but he's been, in fact, oh, wow, wait there. This is the album. I've got. Remember the thing I was talking about we're going to do later? I'm going to go get one album I've forgotten about. 10 seconds. I can still hear you, so we can still chat.
Neil, for those who are listening to this, is going for a dig through his vinyl collection and pulling out a few gems. So if you are listening to this, you might want to go and watch it at the same time.
And hopefully there might be some obvious things in there that you go, oh yeah, of course. But there'll definitely be a few little, oh, who's that? You know. So I won't dwell on this guy too much because I'll get into it when we look at the records. But a guy called Cubby O'Brien, who did play, funnily enough, with the Carpenters. And there is a clip you can see him and Steve Gadd play together. Have you seen the clip of Steve when he does the Mickey Mouse Club?
Oh yeah, when he's about 11.
Yeah, or even younger. I think he's about 7. Oh, well, anyway, and he plays, and then gets off and does a tap dance, and the other guy gets on to play is Cubby O'Brien.
Wow!
And he was one of my the guy had this incredible feel and sound, and of course used as was appropriate for the time, the kind of like a 5-piece Ludwig set. You know, like a 22, 12, 13, or I think he had a 24 or 22 or 24, and like a 13, 14, 16. But then 4 concert toms over the hat. So it was basically a very basic set with 4 concert toms over the hi-hat, you know. And that was the sort of Ronnie Tutt thing of, or Hal Blaine, of having a basic small kit and adding toms to the left kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's, you know, as everybody does, if you go with the most times there's a contemporary fashion of sounds, setups, sizes, and the one at the time was everything.
All of it.
Yeah. What do you use? Yeah, I use everything.
Yes.
Somebody told me, I forget who this was, but somebody told me that a guy said to them, I think it was in the toilet, said to them, "Oh, are you the drummer?" And he said, "Yeah," and he was using a little 4-piece kit, you know. And this guy in the toilet said, "Yeah, I'm a drummer as well." He said, "But I play full kit, you know." I play full kit, you know, like, which is, you know what I mean. You can kind of, if you know about that era, yeah, okay, yeah, I got it. I don't just use like 4 drums. Yeah, I play full kit, you know. So, but yeah, fashions change and setups change, and it's not just from. I think a lot of it's not just from not just fashion. Of a physical setup, but it's also what the music of the day requires. You know, so music of that day sounded great with multiple tom setups, you know, and then if some other trends happen and you go back to the Beatles days and that wouldn't have sounded good, you know, or into Motown or. But then you come forward and maybe, again, certain genres require more toms, you know. So, I mean, look at the kind of soul, R&B, gospel scene, kind of. A lot of those guys have maybe 3 or 4 rack toms, couple of floor toms, you know. So it's almost going back to what it was, you know.
Yeah.
Like so, 8, 10, 12, you know, Simon at London Drum said when he's putting a rig together for those guys, he's often putting together 3 or 4 racks and a couple of floors, which is not too far away from the crazy 70s days, you know.
Well, that's it. I mean, at that point in the 70s, I remember seeing now old footage of my granddad playing with, you know,
great player, yeah,
with Alan Hull of Lindisfarne or whoever, and he's got 3 concert toms, and then a bass drum and a floor tom and a snare. You know, but 3.
That was also a thing, yeah.
Above sort of the mid 70s, that was the thing you did. You had 3 concert toms tuned really dead with a load of tape and tissue on the top, and then a floor tom and a bass drum.
Yeah, and that in isolation booth, close mics sounded amazing, you know.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite players, another guy we'll get into in the records, John Guerin, had a very similar setup with Joni Mitchell, LA Express. I think he had something like a 12, 13, 16.
Yeah.
With a 10 to the side. So 10, 12, 13. And again, those were concert toms.
Yeah. Well, that was the fashion, you know.
And I remember when I was sitting here and we were doing the drum hang things with, particularly the one with Steve Gadd. And I think somebody said, "Oh, I miss the days when you had like the extra toms and the Evans heads and all that, you know." And he quite rightly said, "Well, that was appropriate then, and it's not now." So it's great to be, so musically aware that you are able to feel that. You're bringing something that's fresh. You're constantly evolving, but at the same time staying true to what you do. You know.
Yeah, and you know, when you go back and play some of that stuff in a situation, whether it's a session for you or a gig, you can pull that out. I know you were saying about what you've just set up for the Sister Act thing. You've gone for that John Guerin sort of.
Yeah, it's sort of disco. It's kind of disco meets. I mean, it's set in about 77, so that was the multi-tom, years. I mean, there were some guys using 1 up, 1 down, or 1 up, 2 down because of Bonham and all that kind of thing. But so I'm using. Ideally, I love playing 4 drums. Like a 20, 12, 14 with the ride. Well, basically, I've lost you. Oh, there we go. Basically, this, like 20, 12, 14. It's great. And in terms of have you still got me? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. In terms of kind of language on the kit, I feel like that's a very expressive thing to play. But tonally, sometimes I feel like I want to hear more. Because once you've played the sonically and in a kind of melodic way, if you've gone high to low and you've got 2 toms, well, you've kind of resolved every fill already. Whereas even if you've got say a 12, 13, 16, you can move from the 12 to the 13 and not resolve the fill yet until you get to the 16. It's a kind of a different way to think. You're not really thinking about say licks or chops or stickings or patterns or anything like that, but you totally thinking sonically, like where do I want to leave this fill kind of hanging in the air, or does it want to actually resolve and give the payoff of the release of the fill, or do you want to play the fill on 1 tom and then the middle tom? And people don't feel like they've had the full payoff, So it's nice to have a few extra tones, I think, But physically, I love playing 1 up, 1 down. It's great.
Yeah. So let's.
On the show, I've actually gone for what would arguably be thought of as a kind of GAD setup, which is a 20, 10, 12, 14, and 16. With, weirdly, I haven't used them since the 70s. Is clear black dot heads, which sound phenomenal. I mean, on the 3-ply broadcaster. Oh my god, incredible! Yeah, incredible.
So that is the sound of that day.
And weirdly, I've got them wide open. I've got a tiny bit of tape just to kill a bit of a resonance, okay, but they're generally wide open. But the great thing about the broadcaster range is they've got a very short natural decay, so they die anyway, which is great,
Yeah. So how did you get sort of? I know we spoke about this a while ago. But how did you get from Coventry into London? So that change from the working men's clubs to the London scene.
It's funny because I watched the Steve Gadd interview with Rick Beato, which is phenomenal because they're both from the same town. And Steve is talking about going to all those great clubs back in the day in the 60s and seeing all the great bands and musicians, all the great drummers. He's talking about all the true masters, the greats like Papa Joe Jones and Max Roach and Gene Krupa. And I think, man, how did I even pick up a stick? It's like, I mean, he said his dad used to take him along and he would be able to sit in with all like Count Basie. And I mean, it's just phenomenal. I thought it was incredible. And there I am sitting right slap bang as far in the middle of England as you can possibly get away from the coast, in the middle of nowhere kind of thing. But it was a weird thing. And again, I was talking to a friend of mine about this the other day. I didn't make any kind of, I didn't kind of hustle any kind of gig or anything. I didn't know how to. I mean, there was no social media. There was, things just sort of gradually fell into place. It, kind of fell into my lap a little bit in very small increments that I didn't even notice at the time. But I went to the Isle of Wight with a couple of friends of mine. They were singers and they wanted me to play for Easter for like a week. It was me and a keyboard player and those two singers. And I didn't like it. It felt like what I was already doing in Coventry, away from home on the Isle of Wight. I felt like we were stuck in the middle of nowhere doing something that wasn't as good, you know. So I was packing my gear up to come home, and the guy in the same building there was a big band, I think a 10-piece band, and the band leader asked me if I could read music. So I said I could. And he asked me to do the summer season, which was 1979. I was 17. And so I was like, yeah, great. So I had kind of a gig. I moved away from home, 17, and earning a little bit of money and playing 6 nights a week. It was great. And I did that for 2 summers. And then again, the saxophone player in the band, in that big band, said to me, hey, the drummer, he was going on to the QE2 cruise ship, and he said the drummer in the band couldn't do the gig. And he said, I've spoken to the band leader, and if you want the gig, it's yours. No, it's yours. It's your gig. And I said, great. So that was it. I was on the QE2. And that's where I met all my London connections, all the young guys that were just making a bit of a crack, you know, breaking into London. A lot of them were on the ship for a month or 2 or whatever. So I made a few contacts to come into London, and that was it.
So how long were you on the QE2 for?
It wasn't long. It was a year, but I wasn't on for a year. It was from when I started to when I finished was a year, and I would go on for sort of like a 3-week trip and come off and then go back a couple of weeks later. The longest I was on was I did do a world cruise in 1981. So I was 18, 19. And that was 3 months. Yeah, 12 week. Was it 12 weeks? Yeah. Anyway, 3 months. And that was amazing. You know, to have done that at that age was fantastic. It was great. Well, and that was a great gig because that gig, I was playing in a quartet, and we were doing the nightclub gig. So we would start. We didn't start playing till about 10:30 or something at night, and then we'd go through till about 1:30 in the morning or something. If there was still people wanting to hear any music, you know. But the keyboard player, who was fantastic, a guy called Jeff Raitt, he was so dedicated. You know, we'd go ashore somewhere in like some beautiful tropical beach in the Caribbean, and he would stay on the ship and transcribe the whole of Gaucho or something, you know. and we'd come off, we'd get back on the ship, and he would present us with these charts and say, hey, we're going to do the first side of Gaucho tonight, Steely Dan, you know. And I'll be like, oh, cool, great, you know. Yeah, so that was a really nice gig because there was some great music around at that time that was contemporary. So we'd be playing all this kind of Donny Hathaway, Stevie, Steely Dan, Eagles. You know, it was a great gig. Yeah, really great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny you should say going on a cruise at that sort of age, because that's exactly what Ashley did. He was on the ship.
Okay.
What, 19-ish?
Yeah,
18,
yeah.
19?
Which ships?
On a couple of the new Saga ships, and yeah.
And what's it like? Do you is there equipment there? Do you have to take yours or what?
Yeah, no amps and stuff provided, and kit and all that kind of stuff.
You could just take your cymbals and snare or something like that.
Yeah, well, I play bass, so all I had to take was my. I had to take my. I hope you don't hold that against me. I had to just take my guitar, and that was it. So, yeah, it was ideal, really.
I think when I was certainly then back in those days, nothing was there. I think the only thing that was on the ship were a couple of grand pianos. You know.
Yeah.
So everybody took gear. So I had to take my gear.
And when you did the ships, were you based in one room, or did you have to move round? Or
it was nice actually, because yes, we were based in one room mainly, So my kit would be set in. My kit was set up in. It's very posh. It was the Queen's room on the QE2. It was so beautiful. I mean, I think some guys were. What's the word? Not jaded, but cynical. That's the word.
Yeah.
About the gig. But I wasn't cynical about it at all. I thought it was a great opportunity. I was seeing the world. I was making, okay. I was making a bit of money, seeing the world with some great musicians. I made some great mates, and playing every day. Didn't have to move my gear. It's like I loved it. It's a great gig. I mean, I wouldn't want to do it forever, but I really enjoyed it. And to do something like that when you're such a young man is phenomenal, I thought. So, my kit was set up in the Queen's room. And that's where I would play most of the time, but we would often switch. So we'd have to go play, like, say, a little afternoon tea set in a different room. And I'd use one of the other guys' gear that was already set up. And so the other Frosty Beadle, Martin Beadle.
Yeah. Funnily enough, I was phenomenal. Last week in London when I was down, we ended up in the pub.
He's a phenomenal drummer. He's phenomenal, Frosty. And I used to go watch him play.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. I'd go see these bands. I mean, amazing players, and go watch Frosty, And then he'd come watch me, and we'd hang out, talk about. I think he was the first guy that mentioned Vinny to me, and I was like, "Oh, never heard. Who's that?" And I'd talk to him about records that I liked, like Stevie Wonder, and it was just nice kind of community. I mean, I think there was my first taste of what I'd missed by not going to. I didn't go to like music college or anything, just having private lessons. So I missed out on that kind of group thing. But there, I got a sense of it just hanging out with a lot of musicians. It was great because there were 2 big bands on that ship, and then a couple of quartets and duos, and so there was a lot of music going on. It's great.
And then you managed to make that transition from ship life to life in London.
Yeah, I mean, I was very aware. Although I loved it, I was very aware that you could kind of put your feet up and that'd be it. You could do that forever.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's an ego thing. I don't think it's based in ego, but I just knew I wanted to do something more. I don't know. Maybe that is ego. I don't know. But I just felt like no, it wasn't. I just felt like that I wasn't satisfied. I just wanted to kind of keep going. So and I guess. I mean, I don't think, to be honest, I don't think there's anything wrong with not keeping going. As a keyboard, when I spent those couple of years on the Isle of Wight, the keyboard player in the band was probably about 10 years older than me. Yeah, I was about 17. He was about 27. And I think he was a really great player and a great singer too. He had kind of a Billy Joel thing going. But I think he just loved the kind of quiet life of being on the Isle of Wight, and he kind of got a couple of rungs up the ladder and thought, "Hey, I like this. This is cool." And he got off there, which is cool. It's fine. But I just wanted to keep going a bit, so see what happened.
So why don't we start diving into some of the session stuff? I know Ash just discovered an album that you played on a long while ago this week.
Yeah, I think Vanishing Point it was called, by Joe Hubbard.
Oh yeah, that was I was sharing a flat with Joe at the time. He lived in Clapham Common South Side, and it was his flat, and so I shared this flat with him, which was very kind of him. And he just was a great player, and he had this band called Hubbard's Cupboard, and it was just crazy music, kind of mad fusion. And I think he lived in Los Angeles, and the drummer at the time was David Garibaldi in his band.
Wow!
So it was that kind of groovy fusion. It was great. Very harmonically complex and rhythmically complex. So yeah, it was great. It was a great gig, and certainly good to play when you're about 22 or 3 or 4 or whatever. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was challenging music, and it was a really good band. But also at the time, I was doing that band, and I was also doing the Morrissey Mullen band. And the great thing about that was, I mean, those two guys were world class. I mean, literally, Jim Mullen to this day is one of the finest guitar players in the world. He's amazing. And Dick Morrissey was the tenor player. And they had lived in New York for a few years in the late 70s, and used to, it culminated in when the band Stuff, which was that great band made up of the New York session elite. It was Richard T., Eric Gale, Cornell Dupree, Gordon Edwards on bass, and then Chris Parker originally, and Steve Gadd. So they used to play at a club called Mikkel's, and when that band went to Japan, Dick Morrissey and Jim Mullen put a band together in New York with Steve Jordan. Who else? I can't remember. Cliff Carter was playing keyboards, and Hiram Bullock, I think, playing guitar. Anyway, so they brought that kind of instrumental R&B thing from New York back to London, and my favorite thing at the time was Stuff. I loved that band, and I couldn't believe it. So when I got that gig with the Morrissey Mullen band, I was in heaven. So I was doing the Morrissey Mullen band and the Hubbard's Cupboard thing, which was a lot more intense, a lot more complicated music, but it's great. And the amazing thing is, with the Morrissey Mullen gig, I mean, most gigs at the time, we're talking 1980, no, before that, 1982 maybe. I was about 19 or 20 when I got that gig. Most gigs would pay 20 quid, 25 quid, or whatever. And the first gig I did with the band, I made £100. It was like 5 gigs worth of money, and we were doing that kind of 3-4 times a week. So I was making, suddenly, off doing pub gigs with Morrissey Mullen, I was able to pay my rent and survive in London just doing pub gigs. It was incredible, So, and then off the back of playing in that band, I got sessions, and there was a guy called Mitch Dalton, who's a great player, and at the time was certainly the number one guitar player in town for records, movies, all the rest of it. And again, he said to me, "Can you read?" I said, "Yeah." And within days, my phone was ringing for jingles, TV section. He was working for this company called General Bookings, which hired musicians for all the sessions. And suddenly I found myself driving my gear to all the studios in London, Advision, Maison Rouge, Aerodel, Abbey Road, and I was, oh my God, yeah. And what I loved, I knew that was where I was very big into Simon Phillips, and that Simon had kind of gone through that thing of doing lots of faceless sessions, anonymous sessions, and to me that was it. That was it. I'd made it, I was playing at Advision Studios where Simon had his kit, and I thought, that's it. It's the ultimate, It's great.
Yeah, so, and it's amazing that you did that in, what was that, about 82, did you say? 82, 83?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
you
were born, I was 19, I was 19, yeah.
Which, I mean, Simon Phillips was about the same, I think, when he started doing it, maybe a year or two
he
younger.
Was a lot earlier. He was about 15, because he lived here. Well, of course, not because he lived here, because he was outrageously good. But also he was right in the thick of it, And I think he's about 5 or 6 years older than me. So that crucial age gap then, I was, say, 14 or 15, and he was already like 20 and cleaning up, and like, oh my God. And he's such a lovely guy, and what a musician, and deservedly so, has had worldwide reputation. It's phenomenal. And but just to be kind of following in those guys' kind of hallowed footsteps I knew I was on the right track for, I knew I'd got off the ship for a good reason now. That was good.
Yeah.
And I started doing sessions for Mo Foster, the bass player, who was Phil Collins' bass player at the time, and was doing he did lots of sessions with Simon, actually. And also a guy called Graham Jarvis, who was the drummer with Cliff Richard, who had unfortunately passed away a year or two before. And Mo and Graham were very big pals. And Graham had left a little bit of a hole, So I started working with a guy called Dave Mackay in his studio down in Surrey with Mo and Ray Russell. And again, kind of faceless, kind of B-level records and TV shows and musical stuff, but always, sometimes 1 or 2 sessions a week down there, and then going into Advision to do jingles and and then some film stuff at CTS up at Wembley, and big, kind of like, oh my God, walk in, there's a 80-piece orchestra, like, oh, okay. Yeah. Sight reading, and that's where it was all coming together, the lessons with Max and the kind of constant work kind of thing. Yeah.
I suppose everything before then prepared you for when all that hit you, whether it was the ship or the night, the working men's clubs, the whole thing had you ready so that when you walked into a film session for the first time with a huge orchestra, you didn't feel unprepared.
No, that's right. I mean, I was and still am going into those situations. It's be a little shaky going into those sometimes. I mean, if you're doing it a lot, it's you like anything, you get used to it. But there's it's good. I think certainly, I mean, Max Abrams was very hard. He was very hardcore, and he kind of instilled kind of I don't know, maybe he built up a bit of a hard veneer. So when I presented with this stuff, I just thought, yeah, all right, let's do it. Stupidly. I don't know. Maybe it's the same thing with, I don't know. I watch tennis, with my family, and I see young guys like Alcaraz and all these guys just kind of stepping onto these huge arenas. I'm not saying what I did was the same by any means, but I think it's a similar thing where you're faced with an adverse situation, then you just kind of maybe don't even think about it. You just kind of get on with it,
Yeah, so it was most of the 80s in London, and then was it the 90s when you upped sticks and moved over to America?
Yeah. That wasn't until the mid-90s.
Mid-90s.
Yeah, but I had started working in 93. I got called to do, I'll never forget the phone call. It was great. This French guy called me to work with, he said, would you be able to tour France for 5 weeks with a French singer called Véronique Sanson? And that was early 93. And I'd only just the month before got married. And and I was busy in London, and I thought, I don't know if I really want to go to France for 5 weeks, and I'll miss out on all the sessions, And I was just about to say I can't do it, and I said, well, who's in the band? Who's doing it? And he said, oh, the bass player is Lee Sklar. And I was a huge James Taylor fan at the time, and I thought, oh my, okay, and kind of thought about it and just thought, wow, I think, yeah, that would be good. And that was phenomenal. I did that gig with Lee for about 15 years. I mean, there were a couple of years towards the end where we didn't do it, but it was about a 15-year gig. It was not great. So he became a good friend and a good ally when I was in Los Angeles.
When it comes to those types of gigs, I was wondering, especially that less so with the session stuff. Is it a case of you sent demos and expected to learn it, or is it a charted up kind of thing?
Well, I think a lot of that has changed, really, because it's changed in some ways, but it used to be backtracking to like the session scene. I mean, you would never get anything. You'd never know anything before time. So something hardcore like a film session or a jingle, the arranger would be there and you'd be set up and he's walking around, or the copyist is walking around and just handing out the parts onto the stands, violins, horns, percussion, rhythm section. And the first time you see the music is 9:30 and you start at 10, so it could be 27 pages of tacit and you kind of go, oh. And then one symbol before lunch, or it might be horrendous time signatures and classical snare drum, like, oh my God, yeah. But in terms of demos, I mean, a lot of times now I get the chart sent through on a PDF and some kind of music demo or something sent as a file. So now I can be looking at the music a week ahead, and sometimes I purposely, it sounds a bit masochistic, but sometimes I purposely won't look at it to kind of put myself through the agony of what it used to be like. I know that's kind of twisted, but I want to remind myself of how hard it used to be.
Yeah,
not be easy on myself. So I'll kind of get there early, look at the charts, and sometimes think, oh man, I should have looked at this.
Yeah,
but sorry, John.
No, I was just on the film thing. I remember Steve Pierce, when we had him on about a year ago, he mentioned the Angry Birds session that I think you'd both done. For that
was good. Yeah, there was some. I mean, a bit of a. It's the kind of thing that Vinny would eat up, But for us mere mortals, it was complicated, and it was written, and Steve was playing one thing, and I was playing another, and they were supposed to meet up, and it did sound good, but I think Steve felt. Did he say something like he wanted to have me put my part down or something?
Yes, it was either something like recording separately, not at the same time, so that you could.
Yeah, he hadn't quite got it comfortable, and I'd figured out a way to. I remember it was in 7, but the groupings were going across the bar line or something, and I marked it up so. Not a cheat, but a kind of. I found a musical way of phrasing it that I could assimilate quickly, to make it more groove friendly, So otherwise it sounded very bitty, and I like to try and make things sound comfortable, So and Steve was like, I think he said something like, "Yeah, you go ahead. I'll figure it out later." So I remember thinking, "Oh man, really? Now the pressure's on."
I think
now they're all just listening to me.
I think making it groove friendly, you've just hit upon one of the biggest points of everything that I know that you do, and a lot that we do is taking that and making it groovy. That's the job.
Yeah, I mean, I used to. I'm not really a big fan of. I know some people thrive on odd times, and it's certainly not one of my fortes. I mean, I understand it, and I've certainly delved into it, and I know how to make things sound like they're like a double time, odd time, or a half field odd time, like say in 9 or something, or 5, or So I know how to subdivide them and how to feel them. But I do like to. Simon says a very similar thing, but he's a total master of it. If I can, I don't know. I don't think it's a cheat, but if there's a way to break it up so you're feeling it slightly more. Not to make it sound like it's 4, but to make it feel like that you're not on the edge of playing this odd time, but you're able to relax on it like you're playing in 4 or something.
Yeah, I think it was Simon who probably said something to the tune of "play it in 4 until you find what's left at the end of each bar."
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And just
yeah.
try and make it feel as normal as it can for as long as possible.
Yeah. I mean, and really just find the. I think what it is when I say cheat, that's not the right word at all. It's not cheat, but try and find the musical sort of phrase within the bass drum and the snare drum kind of thing. The way that they are going to break up the bar or break up the time. So. I mean, there's time signatures sometimes that I hear, and for a while I don't know what the time signature is. I'm just hearing the phrase, and really, in a way, that I'll give myself a hard time about that. Like, you should be able to spot that instantly, but in a way, I'm just hearing this flow of phrases, and I think, oh yeah, what is that? 5? Oh no, actually, that's 6, or is it 5? No, it is 6. And because I'm hearing this phrase and of somebody playing, and they're making it flow so beautifully. I'm thinking, oh no, it's 5. That's cool. The way he's breaking that up,
No, that's
drummers like Gad, for instance. The way he'll break up 5 might be not the obvious way, or John Guerin does it too. Yeah. You don't associate those guys as being virtuoso odd time players like Vinny or Simon or somebody, but maybe coming at it from a slightly different place.
Yeah. And so let's sort of, this being a drum and bass sort of podcast, I think you've mentioned on the phone about you'd done some sessions with Tony Levin and Anthony Jackson at one point.
Yeah, in fact, I wonder if it's here somewhere. Oh yeah, here it is. When I was going through, I said I was going through my mum's. I was going through my old stuff at my mum's house. When I did the sessions with Tony, he gave me his book, and he signed it. He signed it to me and Diana, which is very nice. And there's a terrific couple of photos. Well, they're all great photos. But they're all taken by him, and a lot of them he has a little foot switch on stage, and he'll preset cameras up on stage. But particularly, I mean, he was in one of my all-time favorite bands, which was the Paul Simon band, the One Trick Pony band. So there's these great pictures of Gad and Richard T.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, and then there's a great one of Gad, which is there's these couple. But this one, which is probably my favourite Gad one. It shows probably what his life was like most of the time back then. Yeah. So that's very nice. That was very nice of him. Yeah, and that was. Because I did these. I ended up working in. I can't remember how the connection came about, but I worked in upstate New York a lot around the kind of Woodstock, Bearsville area, and that's kind of upstate where Gad's from. So a lot of those guys live up there, like Rochester way, like Tony Levin. Who else was living up there? Warren Bernhardt, great piano player, who played with Paul Simon and Simon Garfunkel. Tony Levin, Gad, Mike Minieri, the Vibes player. A lot of those guys were from upstate New York. And I ended up doing these records with a guy called Artie Traum. His brother, great name, his name was Happy Traum. He famously played with Dylan quite a lot, with Bob Dylan. And I did these sessions with people like Rory Block. She was a blues guitar player, singer, a bit kind of Bonnie Raitt-ish. And Artie. And it would be, I'd turn up and there's Warren Bernhardt playing piano, and Tony Levin or Anthony Jackson, or I was like, oh my, yeah, okay, this is good. Yeah, it was very nice.
Yeah,
and before we got married, Artie schemed a little scheme that New York was center point. I was in London, and Diana, before we got married, was in California, and he said, "You guys should come in and." Yeah. Anyway, that was a nice time. It was great.
That's nice. Yeah, and then what was the session scene like in LA when you were out there? Because I know you did.
Well, I mean, to be honest, yeah. It was. I mean, I really needed an ally, and that's who Lee Sklar was. He was recommending me for really great sessions, So I did some very nice things there, and I also had a very good ally in Greg Bissonette, because he and I are really good friends, and I'd already done a session for Jerry Hay for a Star Wars movie that Greg had played on, but they couldn't use. I don't know what it was, but they couldn't use his performance, and they needed to re-record it. And Jerry Hay was coming to London to record Derek Watkins, trumpet player, and he asked Derek if there's anyone in London who could redo these drums. So Derek recommended me, which was very nice. And so I got to work with Jerry Hay on the Star Wars movie, which was brilliant. And actually, that was another thing that I found at, hey, Di, is that box of tapes around? Oh, just 1 second. Is that box? Ah, there it is. 1 second, chaps. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I found all these cassette tapes. At my mum's, when I was going through all that stuff the other day, and one of them was this one.
Wow.
Can you see it?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what Jerry Hay wrote that on there. And basically, when I got to the session, he handed me a drum part that looked like a transcription. It was really detailed. And so I presumed that that's what Greg had played on the chart. And he wanted me to duplicate. He'd written it so specifically because he wanted it to be very close. So I played it exactly as written. And then later, when I spoke to Greg about it, I said, hey, I got your transcription. And it was pretty hard, And he said, no. He said, that's not transcription. He said, he handed me that part. He said, well, I had to play that. And I was like, oh, my God. So anyway, on this tape, there's Greg in one speaker and me in the other. And we sat at Lansdowne Studios at the control desk, meticulously going, microscoping whether I was flamming or it didn't need to be that close, but I think we got takes done pretty quickly, probably within 20 minutes. So I'd done a couple of takes and it was close, and then I basically got it probably within half an hour or something. I got it, and then he said to me, no, one more. It's not quite right. And I was furious in a jokey way. I was like, what are you talking about? No, it's perfect. What do you mean? And he said, wait, I'll show you. And there's a stop with a 2-bar gap or something. And I said, yeah, what? And he said, yeah, listen. And Greg was tapping his foot on his heel on the hi-hat. And he just a joke, he said, come on, do another one with that. He said, come on, we can get it. So I did another complete take with tapping my heel in the break. It was crazy. Anyway, so that's that. And that was for, you can hear it. It's on YouTube. It's called Jedi Rocks. And it's in the Return of the Jedi remastered movie that came out in about 95 or something. Something like that. Yeah. How did we get onto that? I can't remember. Oh, Greg being an ally. So, so working in LA was pretty good. In fact, the other thing Greg got me to do which has become a joke in the house here, is I did the last season of Friends, because he'd done all that, the little 3, 4, 5 second little bits going into the break or whatever, all those kind of things. And he couldn't do the last season, so I did season 10. So anytime you see season 10 and those bits, so the joke is in the house. I'll be listening if they're watching Friends, and I'll know it's season 7 or whatever, and I'll go, "Oh man, those drums sound terrible. Who's that?" And then when it's season 10, I'll go, "Oh man, those drums sound amazing." It's just a joke thing. So, but it's all my boys will say, "Man, listen to those drums. They sound amazing. What season is this?" "Oh, season 10." It's hilarious. Yeah. So.
Oh my God.
Yeah, Greg was very nice to me. Very nice. He's a good guy.
And did you do the early seasons or the later seasons of the American Voice as well at some point?
No, I did American Idol.
American Idol, that was it.
Yeah, and that was a great band because that had a lot of my heroes in it. Tom Scott was in the band. Tom Scott and Dean Parks playing guitar, who was on those early Stevie Wonder records, and basically was on everything. That was a nice gig, fabulous, and a lot of that we did live and pre-record sessions at the studio with all those guys. Yeah, it was great. So yeah, all good. What else did I do out there? A little bit of live, a lot of live playing. Bit of touring. Went up to Nashville a few times with Lee, or across to Nashville with Lee. And there was one time, I couldn't believe it. I was at the airport with Lee. We were going to Nashville, and he said, "Hey, watch my bass. I'm going to the bathroom." So he walked off, and I've got my suitcase, his bass, didn't move. And I see about a couple of gates down, Ronnie Tutt waiting and walking. I was like, "Oh no, Lee, come back, come back." I wanted to go and say hello to Ronnie. I couldn't move because of the equipment, I couldn't risk leaving it. And he boarded the plane, and I missed him. I just wanted to say hi, so that's a memory.
Yeah.
And I told Lee, and he's like, "Oh man, he's a great guy. Yeah, I love Ronnie." Yeah.
Incredible.
So, and there was another nice moment on the American Idol gig, actually, when I wasn't playing one week. When it was Motown week, they got the Funk Brothers in to do the session. So they said, "Oh, you're not needed because we've got the Motown guys, So I asked if I could go along anyway and just sit at the back, be a fly on the wall. And so, of course, in they come, and it's Uriel Jones, Jack Ashford, the tambourine player, and the guy plays vibes and tambourine. A couple of the guitar players, and my good friend Alan Slutsky, who I've known for probably 25 years, even then. And he put that whole thing together, the James Morrison book, and he also did the Motown movie, the Shadows of Motown. So he put everything together. So I got to see, I mainly wanted to see the guys, but I really want to see Alan. Bob Babbitt was playing bass, who was the kind of, he played on a lot of the big hits. It wasn't all James Morrison. So anyway, at one point, I was just in heaven, sitting at the back of the control room, and the producer, the arranger at the time, Nigel Wright, said to me, he could see my, I was just glowing with adoration for these guys. And he said, "Hey, Neal, I think we need some more hand claps. Why don't you go in the booth with Jack?" I was like, "Oh, man." So I'm standing in the room with Jack Ashford, and I'm watching him put the Motown tambourine down, and then we do hand claps together. I'm like, "Oh, my God." Yeah, so that was great. Yeah.
Nothing quite like that for a session.
And I've got nice picture of me standing next to Jack sitting at the vibraphone, having just done this killer take and the tambourine, and he's just sitting down grinning like he looks like a little schoolboy, like, wow, this is amazing. And I'm just there like, oh my God.
Yeah, and then it was
that was probably my first memorable love of music.
Yeah.
Was hearing Motown on the radio.
Yeah, so it was nice for it to kind of go full circle there, and then you get
oh man, I'm standing with the guys, yeah, amazing.
You were literally standing in the shadows of Motown.
I was. That's right, yeah, because and Alan, my friend Alan Slutsky, he used to write a guitar column in Guitar Player magazine, and his kind of pseudonym was Dr. Licks. He would transcribe a lick from a whatever record at the time. He'd transcribe it for guitar players, and he basically put those guys back on the map by doing that movie.
Yeah. It's great. If you haven't seen it, go and watch it.
Yeah, man, that's ultimate for me. That's it. So
how did you get from LA to back? Because was it when you came back from LA you ended up on the van gig?
Yeah, well, it was a weird thing because I was very, very happy out there. It was great. Things were going well, and I was busy. And then I came back to Europe for something. I can't remember what it was. I think I remember Lee Sklar and I worked on this thing called Era, Era, with a guy called Eric Levy. He'd hired us both to play on the record, and then we came back to do some gigs. And so I think I kind of came back here for a bit. We were in Europe, and I came back here, and then I was doing I think some sessions happened around London, and a little tour of maybe like a Michael Ball tour or something, like an orchestral tour. It was nice. And so anyway, I'd been back here for a bit, and I'd missed out on quite a few things in LA, and I was like, oh man, I need to get back. And so as soon as I went back, I got word that Van Morrison was looking for a drummer. And I thought, well, that might be good. So I went to the gig, which was at I can't remember what theatre it was now. Anyway, it was in LA. And I was prepared to not like the gig. I thought, no, this is probably not going to be good, but I loved it. I thought, wow, that would be really good. Because it seemed to me, when I watched the gig, that it was only about music. There was no light show. There was no effects. There was no fancy, nothing. It was all just the songs and him. And I thought, yeah, that's good. And I knew all the negatives that we all know about, it's probably, you could make a whole podcast about the vanecdotes, as we call them. Anyway, that gig lasted for close to 3 years. That gig, I did that for. So in a roundabout way, we moved back without moving back. It was a kind of a weird time. We just sort of transitioned back here. And from when I finished with Van, that I pretty much straight away, again, completely accidentally, started working with James Morrison. And so none of these gigs I've hustled, or I've never been able to do that. I think it's a different time now. I think maybe social media kind of has encouraged that people be a bit more active and outgoing and forthcoming with what they do, but I'm from a different time, and I think I've always just sort of sat back and waited for the phone to ring, which, is probably not the smartest thing to do, really, especially now. But yeah, I came back. I'd finished with Van, and I remember my wife and boys were out in California, and I thought, well, if I'm going to be employed for a bit, I might as well join them and sit on the beach and be unemployed, So I came back. And, I was rehearsing at Bush Studios in Shepherd's Bush, and I'd said to my wife when I was in California that, man, the only guy that I think is worth anything now, and I still think this now, the only guy I've heard that is really like really got it, is James Morrison. And, you know, I thought that he's phenomenal. And so anyway, I'm at Bush Studios in one of the rehearsal rooms, and I step outside like this with a cup of tea, and the keyboard player, MD from next door, walks out, stops, and goes, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Oh, I'm in this." He said, "I thought you lived in California." And I said, "Well, I was until I was doing band." And then he said, I said, "Oh, what are you doing?" He said, "Well, we're next door auditioning drummers for James Morrison." So I said, Anyway, so I went in at the end of the day, listened to the tunes, wrote out a couple of little cheat sheets, and that was that. So yeah, so that was amazing. Yet another kind of little fateful coincidence or whatever, you know.